Okay, here's some information about some of the stuff you'll get in Level 1 of Chapter 4, Applying Logic and Decision Making. First one is using something called relational operators in Excel without using any sort of fancy functions or formulas. I did a very simple one here where this says false right here. And so I made a calculation in here that says basically, is this cell plus this cell equal 4? Well, it doesn't. 2 plus 1 doesn't equal 4 in most cases. But if I change this to a 2, then that changes to true. So you can use these things for certain kinds of functions where you just want to have an easy answer, true or false type question answer. And they use one over here for this function, for this cell, whether the past due balance divided by current year sales is less than 10%, and it comes back true or false, whichever way it is. It doesn't bring back the answer, but brings back just the answer of true or false, not the number answer is what I mean. Okay, then we step up one step in complexity to the OR function. And the OR function, its purpose is to see if the logical arguments are true, and it's sort of a Boolean function, and it'll come back as true unless all of the arguments are false, in which case it'll come back as false. So if we go up here and show you that to you, these are the arguments, or logical arguments here. So in this case, they're both false. H3 is equal to 1. No, it's not. I3 is greater than 90. No, it's not. So since those are both false up here, it comes back here as false. And you can have up to 255 arguments here if you are that psychotic. Okay, on the other hand, here's one here. Oops, what I wanted to do. Where one of the arguments is true and one of them is false. So since they're both not false, that comes back as true, just to show you that they both don't have to be true to come true. As long as one of them is true, at least one of the arguments is true, it'll come back as true. And that's sort of the, for those of you that have had access, the old and or function, or it has to meet one of the criteria, and that's basically the idea here. It has to meet one of the criteria or true, and again, you can have up to 255 of those things. And if 254 of them are false and one of them is true, it'll still come back as true. So again, that can be useful, and they have an example here using that particular function. All right, and then we have something called the AND function. Again, sort of a Boolean idea. And what the AND function does is to check to see if all logical arguments are true, and it only returns true when all of the arguments are true. If any of them are false, it'll come back as false. And then again, that's the Boolean, where if it's AND, it has to meet all criteria, basically. So if we were going to look at, let's see, look at this one here. You'll see that all of these are true with the exception of one, and since one of them is false, it's going to come back as false. It would have to be all true in order to come back as true. So if we have one down here that's true, then you can see that true, 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 true. They all have to be true to come back as true. If any of them are false, it's going to come back as false in that case. So it'll answer different types of questions that you're asking. And down here again, they use the or function. And you sort of have to play with some of these to answer the questions and sort of think logically. So the question they're asking here: do any meet the rule? If any meet the rule, all you need to have here is one that's true. So the or function would be appropriate because only one out of however many has to be true. So in this case, it certainly is something is true in here. So some meet the rule, and then this one, which is sort of just the opposite, do none meet the rule? And it's a slightly different question though. Do any meet the rule means that one, at least one does. The second one means are they all false, basically. And this is kind of not a great one here because I don't think it would come back with the right answer necessarily all the time, but in this case it does, and that is using what's called the not function. And what the not function does is basically just switch true to false. So if that is true up here, then the not, and then referring to that cell, it'll switch it around to false, and vice versa. If that was false, it'd change it to true. So it's just kind of a way to sort of force an answer that you want to have in that case. So that's probably not of all these formulas and functions on this particular sheet, that's probably the least useful or least exciting. So I'll try to break this up, since last time I tried to do videos it was too long, it wouldn't let me upload that. So I'll stop this one and try to do some more on the other levels a little bit later. I hope this was helpful. Goodbye.